The grand ballroom was filled with the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead as the night's most anticipated moment arrived. Jacob was about to accept a prestigious business award. Cameras flashed, and all eyes were on him as he stood tall, looking every bit the successful, self-made man everyone believed him to be. Just as he reached the podium, a voice cut through the crowd. "Jacob, it's me, Emily." He froze. His wife's voice echoed through the room. But instead of turning toward her, Jacob gripped the edge of the podium tighter. Everyone's attention shifted to Emily, standing in the back waving. Her eyes were filled with hope, as if she was proud of him, waiting to share this moment together. But instead of acknowledging her, Jacob leaned into the microphone, cleared his throat, and said something no one expected. "I don't know who that is." A stunned silence fell over the room. People exchanged confused glances, unsure if they had misheard. But Jacob's face was stone cold. Emily's heart pounded as a wave of disbelief washed over her. Had he really just denied her? In front of everyone? The whispers started to spread, the disbelief turning to gossip. "Did you hear what he said? Isn't that his wife? How could he do that?" Jacob stepped down from the podium, ignoring Emily completely. His coldness was unbearable. As he walked past her, her world felt like it was crumbling. But this public humiliation was just the beginning. There was so much more that Emily didn't know. Emily was paralyzed, unable to move as all eyes fell on her. The murmur of the crowd grew louder and louder. Each whisper seemed like a dagger straight into his heart. She had supported Jacob since his darkest days, working alongside him when they barely had enough to pay the bills. Everything he had accomplished, she had been there, but in that instant, he had erased her from his life. With a pale face and trembling hands, Emily walked out of the room, feeling that each step was heavier than the last. How could the man with whom he shared his dreams and sacrifices deny his existence so coldly? What she didn't know was that this went far beyond a simple betrayal in public. That same night, Emily received an unexpected message. Her trusted lawyer, someone who had been with them for years, was calling her urgently. "Emily, you have to know something. Jacob's financial situation is not what it seems. There are suspicious movements in the accounts. He's hiding things." Emily felt her world crumble even more. Everything she believed to be true about her life and marriage was beginning to fall apart. Public denial had not been just an act of humiliation. Jacob was hiding secrets far darker and more dangerous than she had imagined. But instead of collapsing, something in Emily awoke. He wasn't going to let Jacob destroy it. He decided to investigate, to discover what was really happening in the shadows of Jacob's life. As he basked in fame and success, she began to unearth truths that would expose him to everyone. What Emily found took her breath away, and that was just the beginning. Emily spent the next few nights barely sleeping, going through documents, accounts, and emails she had never paid attention to before. Each new detail she discovered brought her closer to a devastating truth. Jacob had not only publicly denied it, but had been moving large sums of money to unknown accounts, and most surprisingly, he had acquired property and luxuries that he had never mentioned to him. Everything seemed to point to a double life that he led with a coldness that now terrified her. But that was not the worst of it. In her search, Emily discovered that Jacob had a secret partner in all those financial movements, and that partner was none other than Claire, her best friend. Claire, the woman who had been at her wedding, the one who had been like a sister to her for years. The pain of betrayal began to transform into rage. How could they have done this to him? How could Jacob betray her in such a way? And worse, how could Claire be involved? The public would see him as a successful businessman, but only Emily knew the truth. Their marriage had been a facade, and now the empire Jacob had built was based on lies. Determined not to remain silent, Emily began to draw up a plan. He knew that if he played his cards right, he could expose not only Jacob's betrayal, but also the web of lies that surrounded him. It wouldn't be easy, but she was no longer the frail, surprised woman of that night in the ballroom. Now she was a woman on a mission. The opportunity to face them face to face came faster than I expected. Jacob had hosted a grand gala dinner to celebrate a new financial arrangement. All eyes would be on him. But this time, Emily wasn't going to stay in the shadows. He knew he had to move cautiously, because once he uncovered the truth, there would be no turning back. On the night of the gala, Emily entered the room with her head held high. He knew that both Jacob and Claire would be there, smiling for the cameras, oblivious to what was about to unfold. What no one in that room knew was that Emily wasn't coming alone. It carried with it irrefutable evidence that would not only bring down Jacob's facade, but also leave him with nothing. And that was just beginning. The gala was in full swing. The hall was adorned with lavish floral arrangements. The lights glittered with a golden sparkle, and laughter filled the air. Jacob, as the host of the evening, moved with an arrogance that only those with power and money can exhibit. Claire, by his side, was the reflection of elegance and complicity. No one could suspect that behind those perfect smiles, there was a hidden web of lies woven with years of deception. Emily, dressed in black, watched from a corner. His mind was working at 1,000 miles an hour, going over every step he had taken up to that point. She knew Jacob and Claire were calm, thinking she'd been taken out of the equation. But what they didn't know was that Emily had come prepared to ruin that illusion of perfection. He had met with his lawyer before the gala, who had provided him with the key documents that would expose Jacob. Not only had he transferred large amounts of money to unknown accounts, but he had also committed fraud in his business dealings, and Claire was his accomplice. Together, they had created a web of corruption that had brought them to the top. But that night, Emily was going to bring them down. Jacob's discourse began, and the room fell silent to hear him. Tonight is a celebration of success, perseverance, and above all, great partnerships, he said, with an arrogant smile as Claire looked at him with feigned admiration. Jacob's words were carefully chosen, designed to impress and maintain his impeccable image. The audience, enthralled, did not know that everything that came out of their mouths was about to turn against them. Emily slowly walked to the front of the room as he spoke, her presence going unnoticed at first. But as she got closer to the center, the gaze began to drift toward her. When he arrived in front of the stage, the silence became palpable. People began to murmur, wondering what he was doing there. "Jacob, why don't you tell everyone the truth?" Emily's voice echoed in the room. Jacob stopped in his tracks, his smile froze. Claire also paled, her mask of perfection slowly crumbling. "The success you boast so much about tonight," Emily continued, "is nothing but a farce. Everything you have built is based on lies, betrayal, and corruption." She took an envelope out of her bag and lifted it into the air. "Here I have evidence that will not only unmask you, but also your dear partner Claire. All the shady dealings, all the fake accounts, everything you thought you hid is here." The audience was shocked. The cameras that were recording the event did not take long to point at Emily. Suddenly, what was supposed to be a celebration of triumph turned into a spectacle of shame. Jacob tried to stay calm. "Emily, I don't know what you're talking about. You're making a fool of yourself." His voice trembled, and beads of sweat began to appear on his forehead. "Ridiculous?" Emily let out a bitter laugh. "The only ridicule here is you, Jacob. And everyone will know it." He turned to the audience. "This man not only denied me as his wife in public, but he has stolen everything from me. Me, you, and all who trusted in him." Jacob began to walk toward her, trying to silence her. But Emily was not intimidated. "Are you going to deny everything too? Because I have proof of everything you have done, and not only that. The relationship you have with Claire goes beyond the professional, right? Because if we keep digging up, I'm sure everyone will know what kind of relationship they really have." The eyes of the audience began to be directed towards Claire, who was now completely pale, not knowing how to react. The tension in the room was palpable. Jacob, caught between Emily's fury and the accusing looks of the crowd, knew his facade was about to collapse. But Emily wasn't done. "And that's not all," he said, taking it a step closer to him. "The money you've been hiding, do you think no one would notice? You stole it not only from your partners, but from charities, from those most in need. You have enriched yourself at the expense of others, and that is the real reason why you denied me. You knew I was too close to finding out the truth." The silence in the room was deafening. Jacob, speechless, began to recoil away, his confidence crumbling in front of everyone. Claire tried to speak, but the words didn't come out of her mouth. "What are you going to say now, Jacob?" Emily stared at him, defying him. "Because the truth is, everyone here deserves to know who you really are. A liar, a thief, and a traitor." The crowd, which had once looked at him with admiration, now looked down on him. Emily had achieved what she had come to do, but something inside her told her that this wasn't over yet. Jacob still had cards to play, and even though he looked defeated, Emily knew the real showdown was about to begin. The atmosphere in the room had become suffocating. The air was thick with murmurs and incredulous looks. The cameras continued to record every second of the confrontation. The guests who once laughed and celebrated now watched with fixed eyes, unable to take their eyes off the chaos that unfolded before them. Jacob, clearly cornered, tried to step forward, but it seemed that his legs were no longer responding as before. His firm and confident posture had completely crumbled, and his voice trembled as he spoke. "Emily, this is not what it seems. You're confused. We can talk about this in private." Emily stared at him, with a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Private? Like when you denied me in public, Jacob? There's nothing more to talk about. The truth is right here, in front of everyone. And this time I'm not going to let you manipulate me or shut me up." The crowd was still silent, but you could feel the tension building up. The world Jacob had built out of lies was about to crumble before his very eyes. Claire, who had until then maintained her composure, finally decided to intervene. He walked quickly toward Jacob, standing beside him, as if his presence could save him. "Emily, please don't do this," Claire said, her voice barely audible. "You know you're exaggerating. It doesn't have to be this way." Emily let out a bitter laugh. "Like this? Claire, you should be thankful that I didn't expose you much sooner. You've betrayed me in the worst possible way, and now that it's all coming to light, do you expect me to stop? You two haven't just lied to me, you've fooled everybody." Claire stepped back, unable to keep Emily's gaze. Jacob, however, tried one last desperate play. "This is all false," he said, raising his voice. "Emily has lost her mind. This is a desperate attempt by a resentful woman." The words echoed through the room, but this time they didn't have the effect Jacob had hoped for. The audience was no longer on his side. The faces that once admired him now looked at him with disapproval. No one believed his lie. That's when Emily decided to drop the final bombshell. He pulled out his phone, picked it up, and started playing a voicemail. The room fell silent as Jacob's voice came out of the speakers. "Claire, we have to do it soon. Emily is starting to get suspicious, and if she finds out about the accounts, we're lost. We get rid of it, keep all the money, and move on. No one will suspect." The silence in the room was deafening. Jacob's eyes widened, and Claire covered her mouth, knowing it was all over. The voicemail revealed the raw, unvarnished truth. Jacob and Claire had planned to get rid of Emily from the start, taking everything they'd built together and leaving her with nothing. Cameras recorded every second of Jacob's fall. His arrogance, his success, his fame, everything was vanishing before everyone's eyes. Emily, however, wasn't done. "This is the true face of Jacob," he said in a firm voice, "a man who had everything, but who lost it through his ambition and treachery. You didn't just betray me, Jacob. You betrayed everyone who ever trusted you." The guests began to whisper to each other, some even getting up from their seats and starting to leave the hall, outraged by what they had just witnessed. Jacob tried to stop them, but it was useless. His reputation was destroyed. Emily turned around, ready to leave, but before she walked out the front door, she stopped and said, "You know what, Jacob? In the end, you did me a favor. You set me free. And now, everyone knows the truth." As she left the hall, the door closed behind her with a boom that echoed through the huge, empty hall. Jacob and Claire were left alone in center stage, defeated, knowing that it was all over. But what Emily didn't know was that Jacob, desperate and cornered, had one last plan up his sleeve. And what was about to happen would change everything again. After Emily left the room, leaving Jacob and Claire at the epicenter of public embarrassment, the room began to empty quickly. But Jacob was not the type to give up easily. While Claire was on the verge of collapse, Jacob remained silent, his mind frantically calculating his next steps. "I knew I couldn't get out of that situation like the man who had walked in. His reputation was in tatters, and his empire was tottering. But there was still something he could do, something Emily hadn't discovered, something that would save him, or at least lead him to the revenge he longed for." As the press team and some onlookers were still around, Jacob approached Claire, who was clearly terrified. "Listen to me," he said in a cold whisper. "This is not over. I have a plan, and we need to act fast. Go to our office and destroy the documents. All records. If we do it now, Emily won't have anything solid to use against us in court." Claire nodded nervously, but doubt was written on her face. "What if it's too late, Jacob? She has those recordings, she has the documents. He has already exposed everything." Jacob grabbed her arm, his eyes flashing with a mixture of despair and fury. "It's not too late. We still have power. We just need to remove any traces that connect it to our operations. And if that fails, there are other methods." Claire swallowed. I knew Jacob was serious. His ambition and unscrupulousness would take him to any extreme, and she wasn't sure how far she was willing to follow him. Meanwhile, Emily in her car was driving back home. Adrenaline was still running through his veins, but he was beginning to feel the emotional fatigue of everything that had happened. He had exposed Jacob and Claire publicly, revealed his secrets, and yet something inside him told him that this wasn't over. Suddenly, his phone rang. He was her lawyer. "Emily, we have a problem," he said in a deep voice. "It appears that someone has been rapidly moving some financial documents from Jacob's accounts. They tried to erase the evidence." Emily bit her lip. I knew Jacob wasn't going to sit idly by, but I didn't expect him to react so quickly. "Is there anything we can do? We have already taken legal action to freeze his accounts, but he needs you to stay vigilant. Jacob is dangerous when cornered, and if he has already lost his reputation, he will not hesitate to use more extreme means to protect what he has left." Emily hung up the phone, her mind now in a whirlwind of thoughts. He knew Jacob was ruthless, but he hadn't calculated how far he could go. And then, as he drove through the dark streets of the city, a terrifying thought crossed his mind. Jacob wasn't just going to destroy evidence. He could be planning worse. Something aimed at her. Back in Jacob's office, Claire was nervous. He had arrived at the company building and began to gather all the incriminating documents that could link them to his fraudulent operations. As she shredded papers and deleted files on computers, she couldn't stop thinking about how they had gotten to this point. How had he allowed himself to be so deeply carried away by Jacob? Now there was no easy way out, and her own fate was tied to his. Suddenly, the sound of the door bursting open made her jump. "Claire!" Jacob shouted as he entered. "We have to move faster. Emily has allies, and if we don't get rid of everything, we're going to get caught." But at that moment, something none of them expected happened. The lights in the building flickered, and suddenly everything went completely silent. Claire looked at Jacob with panicked eyes. "What's going on?" The sound of footsteps approaching echoed through the hallways. The tension in the air became palpable, and they both knew they were not alone. Jacob, his heart racing, tried to stay calm, but something inside him was telling him that things were about to get worse. The door to the office opened slowly, and there, standing in the doorway, was Emily. But this time she was not alone. With her were police officers and prosecutors. "Jacob, this ends here. You can no longer escape the consequences." Jacob took a step back, sweating profusely. This isn't over, Emily. You don't understand what you've gotten yourself into. But Emily understood it perfectly. He knew that Jacob had lost everything he had, and now he was left with only fear. That's enough, Emily said, her voice firm but calm. You always believed that you could manipulate and deceive everyone, but you forgot one thing. The truth always comes out. The officers advanced toward Jacob as Claire slumped into a chair, her face completely distorted. Everything they had worked for, all the lies and deceptions, were now crumbling. But Jacob, in his desperation, still had one last card to play. Emily, he said with a crooked smile, before this is over, there's something you should know. All of this, all my decisions, it was your fault. You turned me into this. Emily looked at him, puzzled. What are you saying? Jacob let out a bitter laugh. You were always the strongest. I just wanted what you wanted. Success, power, everything. And when I succeeded, you didn't need me anymore. So yes, I betrayed you. But I did it because I knew you would never be happy with what I had. You'd always want more. Emily felt a mixture of pity and anger. Jacob had reached the end of his road, and even then he could not accept responsibility for his own actions. No, Jacob, you made those decisions for yourself, and now you'll have to face the consequences. As the officers led Jacob away in handcuffs, Emily felt a release she hadn't experienced in a long time. Finally, the cycle of lies and betrayal had come to an end. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. Jacob still had allies, and even though he was out of the game, there was still much to be done. However, for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was in control of her life again. And this time, she wouldn't let anything or anyone throw her off her path. The days following Jacob's arrest were a whirlwind of news, trials, and repercussions. The media did not take long to cover every detail of the fall of one of the most influential businessmen in the country. What was once admiration for his success had now turned into public contempt. The story of his betrayal and corruption had captured the attention of millions, and his name, which once meant power, was now tainted by scandal. But as Jacob faced the weight of his actions, Emily began to rebuild her life. He had been through an emotional hell, but now he was stronger than ever. With the help of her lawyer and allies, Emily made sure that the victims of Jacob's frauds were compensated, and little by little, the pieces of her life began to fall into place again. One afternoon, as Emily was walking through the park, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the sense of freedom she had regained, she received an unexpected call. It was Claire. After everything that had happened, Claire wanted to apologize. Emily, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I am sorry. I let myself be carried away by ambition, by fear, and I ruined everything. I lost your friendship, my reputation, and all I have left is to regret it. Emily listened quietly, feeling a mixture of emotions. She might have felt avenged, but in her heart there was no longer room for resentment. He had overcome that stage. Claire, he said finally, we all make mistakes. I did it too by trusting Jacob. But the important thing is what you do from now on. Claire broke down in tears on the other end of the line, grateful for Emily's words. I knew life would never be the same, but I also knew I had a chance to start over. Over time, Emily's life blossomed. Not only had she regained her emotional stability, but she had also found a new passion, helping others who had gone through similar situations to hers. His story of struggle and survival inspired many, and his voice, once silenced by betrayal, now resonated louder than ever. One day, while giving a talk on self-improvement, Emily stopped and looked at the audience, smiled. If there's one thing I want you to remember from this story, it's that no matter how dark the situation is, there's always a way out. Sometimes, we have to lose everything to realize what really matters. The room erupted in applause. Emily had found her way, and while the scars of her past remained, they no longer defined her. Jacob, on the other hand, had been sentenced to a lengthy prison term. His last attempt to destroy the evidence had failed, and now in his cell, he had only his own bitterness for company. He reflected on the decisions that led him there, but he knew it was too late to change. Claire, for her part, had begun a new life, far from the luxuries and intrigues that once seduced her. Emily looked to the future with optimism. She knew she had come out stronger, wiser, and better able to face whatever challenge life threw at her. And most importantly, he knew that, in the end, the truth always prevails. What do you think about Emily's story? Do you think Jacob deserved a second chance, or that his fate was fair? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story full of unexpected twists, betrayals, and redemption, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more exciting stories like this one. Activate the bell to receive notifications every time we upload a new video. Thank you for being a part of this amazing community.